On May 23, 2000, 18-year-old Brandy Hicks and her best friend, 17-year-old Liz Reiser were looking forward to their graduation ball and getting ready for it. They decided to spend the last night before graduation together at Brandy's place. Their parents gave the girls permission to stay the night together. The friends often had sleepovers at each other's homes. Brandy was independent and lived away from her parents in the city of New Philadelphia, Ohio, USA. The girls drove together in Brandy's car. They decided to stop by the mall to rent a couple of movies. On the way, the friends chatted about their plans after graduation, about college, and thought about which movies to pick. But they didn't know then that this night would become the worst of their lives. The girls picked out movies at the Hollywood video store and went outside. A man with dark curly hair and a baseball cap approached them. He was very nice and polite and asked for a ride because his car had broken down. The man was in desperate need of help. The friends were hesitant. He introduced himself as 27-year-old Mark. He had a wife and 3 children in a house about a mile away from the mall, Adayensamicht. He explained that he was very tired of walking and had no strength left, and his wife and children were waiting for him at home and were worried. The man offered them $20 for the help. The girls stepped aside to discuss it. They were still in doubt about whether they should help him. The friends were raised in strict families and parents did not allow them to talk to strangers. They were wary of giving a ride to an adult man they didn't know and felt uneasy. Brandy said she was low on gas and wasn't sure if they had enough fuel to drive them and to get back. But at the same time, they thought that their Christian faith taught them to always be kind and help their neighbor. After much hesitation, they finally decided that they would help the man. They called the stranger over and got into the car at 9:30 p.m. After driving for about a kilometer, the girls began to get very nervous. Mark kept changing the directions, which was strange. They felt uncomfortable being in the car with this man. The girls mentioned that the curfew had already started. They needed to be home. The man assured them that they were almost there. He started telling them about his wife and children to calm the girls down. He asked them to stop. Brandy pulled over. The man got out of the car and asked them to wait. He walked off into the darkness, and the girls didn't understand what it meant. Mark soon returned to the car with a large bag and asked them to drive on. They continued on their way, but his house was still nowhere to be seen. They drove out of town and were driving down a deserted road. There were no houses nearby. The girls asked where his house was, and that was when the man showed them a gun. Brandy was behind the wheel. She couldn't take it anymore, pulled over to the side of the road and stopped. The girl asked the man to get out of the car and walk the rest of the way. The man pointed his gun at them and threatened them, demanding they hand over all their money. Mark was no longer the polite man he had seemed to be near the store. He was rude and aggressive. The terrified girls gave him all their money, but it wasn't enough for him. He ordered them to keep driving down the dark road and follow his instructions. The girls obeyed obediently. They were scared and crying. The car drove further and further. The man ordered them to turn right onto a dirt road. They drove through a deserted field. At one point, Mark ordered them to stop. It was in the middle of a remote forest. The stranger demanded they get out of the car and take the laces out of their shoes. They gave him the laces. He ordered Liz to tie Brandy's hands tightly to the steering wheel. The girls wept and obediently complied. Liz tied her hands, saying she loved her friend, while Brandy promised everything would be fine. Then Mark forcibly pulled Liz out of the car. Brandy watched helplessly as the man led her friend further into the dark forest toward the hill. Soon they disappeared from sight entirely. Brandy tried to untie her hands to free herself. While she struggled with the rope, she didn't notice the man sneaking back to the car. He was alone. Mark suddenly opened the door and started yelling at Brandy to get out of the... Brandy started screaming at him. She kicked and resisted. Then the man pulled out a knife and showed it to her. He cut the rope and dragged the girl out of the car. Mark dragged her into the same forest toward the hill. The girl couldn't think of anything at that moment, except for her friend. Brandy looked around for Liz, but she was nowhere to be seen. Just as Brandy saw something in the distance, Mark grabbed her and pulled her in the opposite direction. Soon the girl saw a mound of earth. The man said that her friend Liz was buried there. The girl was terrified. After showing her the spot, Mark grabbed Brandy and led her back to the car. He ordered her to get into the car and take off her shoes and socks. The stranger put the socks on his hands to avoid leaving fingerprints on the wheel, and they continued into the darkness. The man began to mock her, taunting her that he had killed her friend and buried her on the hill. The girl felt that he was toying with her. She cried. Then Mark changed his tactics. He claimed it was a joke. In reality, Liz was alive. He said he had let her go and stage the grave just to scare her. But Brandy didn't believe him. She was certain that the man had killed her friend. Mark drove back along the road they had taken to get into the forest. The car approached the city. The girl hoped the whole way that he would let her go. But suddenly, Mark ordered her to stop and get out of the car. Brandy understood that her chances of survival were slim. After what he did to her friend, she decided that she would try to do something to survive or die trying. Getting out of the car, Brandy realized there was nowhere to run. There were no cars around that she could ask for help either. Then Brandy decided to try and befriend him. She began trying to gain his trust and started telling him about her life to evoke sympathy. At first, it worked. Mark listened and answered her, but at one point, he snapped back and ordered her to shut up. She fell silent and obediently walked with him. The girl was walking barefoot on a rocky road. Her feet were worn bloody. She started complaining about the pain in her feet, and the man said, "Sorry, I didn't think about you." He took off his shoes and gave them to her, and he walked in his socks. At that moment, he was very kind to her, which stunned the girl. They reached some trailer and went in. Inside, the man found beer there and drank it. He tried to rape Brandy, but he didn't succeed. He started telling the girl about his life. He listened to him, hoping that after this, he wouldn't be able to kill her. The man said he studied to be a psychologist, and Brandy said she was into photography. And then they kept going. When they arrived at the railroad tracks, Mark ordered the girl to take off all her clothes. She refused. Then he attacked her and forced her to undress, and then led the girl further along the tracks toward the river. The man ordered her to kneel before him in an execution-style position. She knelt, and he immediately pounced on the girl with a shoelace and began to strangle her until Brandy lost consciousness. The girl regained consciousness, but was afraid to open her eyes, pretending to be dead. Mark began to leave, but noticed that Brandy was still breathing. Then he attacked her and began to mercilessly kick and beat the girl. And then he started trying to snap her neck. But Brandy resisted and desperately fought him for her life. Eventually, he got tired of it all, and the man threw her into the river. The river current was swift and quickly carried Brandy away. Mark didn't realize she was still alive. He hoped that she would either drown or freeze in the cold water. The girl watched him. The man was throwing stones and pacing back and forth, nervous and smoking cigarettes. When he was out of sight, the girl began to make every effort to get out of the water, and she succeeded. She ran toward the road. The girl didn't know what to do at that moment, so she ran for help. She was cold, tired, exhausted, and naked. Brandy walked onto the road and raised her hand. One of the cars stopped. She prayed that the person in the car wasn't Mark. Luckily, it wasn't him. The driver helped Brenda. He took her to the hospital, where police officers came to see her. The girl told the officer everything. She pointed out the place where Mark had buried her friend. The police managed to find the spot, and Liz's body was indeed there. As it turned out, Mark had taken Liz far into the woods. He pulled out a knife and inflicted 3 deep stab wounds to her neck, 1 to her back, and 5 to her head. He slit her throat and buried her. When her parents learned of the brutal murder of Liz, they claimed they forgave the criminal like true Christians. Brandy described the killer, and he was declared wanted. Then a woman came to the station and said her son hadn't been home for a long time. And yesterday he called and confessed the murder to her. He gave his name, Matthew Vaca, and his address. Matthew was arrested. Brandy identified him. It turned out that Matthew had a Dublin criminal past and was on probation for grand theft auto and forgery. He confessed to everything. His car had not broken down. He had made up that story to evoke sympathy from the girls, and it worked. Matthew was charged with kidnapping, murder, and attempted murder. The criminal faced the death penalty. So Matthew decided to take a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. Brandy bravely testified in court against Matthew, where she told her whole story. Matthew was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 96 years. The criminal will be eligible for parole in 2096 and is unlikely to live to see that day. Today, Matthew Vaca remains incarcerated at a correctional facility in Mansfield, Ohio. Brandy, who fought so bravely for her life, not only survived, but did not break. She was able to fulfill her dream and become a photographer. Now, Brandy lives in her hometown. She is married, has 3 children, and is happy. If you liked my work, support this video with a like. Let's discuss this story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you all, and goodbye.